In today's episode, we're finally taking my Silvia for a drive after putting a new motor in it. So before we can take this thing for a drive, there's a few things that we need to clean up. So first of all, putting the fan on is going to be the first thing. I still run the mechanical fan, and it's actually one of the best fans to run on these things, assuming you're using the stock shroud, which I am not. Either way, this thing still runs really cool, so I don't really need to worry about that right now. And it is a pain in the butt with this widened radiator to run the shroud as well. It's just really hard to ever get in here if you need. So right now I'm just running the mechanical fan with no shroud. I still need to put coolant in it, and then there's a few wires and vacuum hoses like this that I need to kind of route and zip tie out of the way so that they don't get eaten up by the fan. On top of that, I also need to wire in my oil pressure gauge. So as you saw in the last video, we had the oil pressure gauges kind of sitting here. We quickly did some short wires just to initially get the thing fired up and to be able to check the oil pressure on it. But now we want to move it into the car so that when we take it for a test drive, we actually know exactly what the oil pressure is the entire time. So because we're breaking this motor in for the first time, this is going to be the first time that we're actually putting load on it. Last video we ran it for about 60 seconds just to check for leaks and stuff. And so this video we're actually going to put load on it, and we're going to put some load on this thing so we can break in the piston rings to the cylinder walls. So we need the oil pressure gauge in the car for that. That's pretty much it. We've also got to make sure that all the fluids are there. So we're low on coolant and we're actually leaking a little bit of oil. So I'm going to show you where that's coming from.
So I had my aftermarket ISR oil pan installed, and there is a bit of an oil leak, as you can probably tell. So the leak is actually coming from this external bung, and this is meant for an external oil cooler or oil pressure gauge or whatever you're deciding to run here. So
it's not really a big deal because it's such a small leak, and we're only putting in a few kilometers before we're draining the oil in this thing again. So the plan is to actually run this thing for only a few kilometers and then drain the oil, change the oil filter, put some fresh stuff in, new oil filter as well, run it for another 100 kilometers maybe, and then do the same thing where we're draining, changing the oil filter. And then at that point is when I'm going to run my good quality synthetic oil. So up until then I'm running just conventional oil, which is a better break-in oil. So enough talking, let's just get to it.
All right, just wiring up the oil pressure gauge in here, and pretty much what I'm doing is kind of reusing some of the connections I've made previously with my other gauges. I have a boost gauge and I have a wideband oxygen sensor gauge. So I'm just splicing into ignition power here, and I've got my signal wire coming from the oil pressure sender, and then I have a nut down here that we're going to use for the ground wire. So I'm just going to reassemble all of this, put it back, and right now I'm just doing a temporary install just so I can get this thing on the road. I do have plans to redo a lot of this wiring because I only have room for 2 gauges right now and I need 3. I need to put some sort of gauge holder in there, and it's just a lot of messy wiring. It's some aftermarket stuff that this car had when it came from Japan, so I kind of want to clean that up at some point. So right now I'm not doing good connections. I'm just kind of twisting the wires and electrical taping them for now. It'll work temporarily, but at some point we're gonna have to redo all this wiring. But let's get this assembled.
All right, it's finally time for the first drive, so we're gonna hop in, start it up, and just take off. So far so good, great oil pressure. It's running good, it's solid. So we just need to kind of put load on it, decelerate,
at about 20 to 25 psi at idle. Things are sounding good. Sounds reliable. A little bit of boost. We're not really going over 4 or 5 psi. Not putting much load on. She died. So there's still something, I don't know if it's the air meter or what it is, but once it warms up, it just wants to continue dying. So yeah, our air-fuel ratio is not good. We're running way too lean. But that's how it's always been, and I wasn't expecting it to run perfectly, so. A little bit of boost. 5 psi. 5 psi. Oh, that is so much fun. Yeah, but we are running way too lean. So we got to figure that out before we burn this motor up. And my signals don't work. So that's something I'm gonna have to figure out. I wonder if I burnt a fuse. I think that's why the gauge wasn't working. Yeah, okay. Well, that is exciting. Good oil pressure. We still have the problem with it running way too lean under boost. And that I knew that wasn't going to be fixed with a new engine, so there's maybe a sensor in there or something. Might have to do a tune of the ECU, but yeah, I think it's good. We're going to bring it back into the garage, do an oil change, and then we'll be able to bring it out on the road and get maybe 20 or 30, 40 kilometers on it, and then we'll go ahead and do another oil change, and then we'll be good to go. So thanks for sticking around, and see you in the next episode.